Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. As we take a look at everything Eagles and NFL, Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com is here as we take a look at some of the draft conversation, some bargain shopping, and more with Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com right now on Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, what's up, buddy?
Hey, Mike, how you doing today?
All is good, my man. Monday is a big day. We're going to get the legal tampering, if you will, in the NFL. But we got so many storylines leading up to that point. And obviously, the Eagles, we were talking with Moshe yesterday. We keep hearing about all the Eagles free agents that might walk. But we haven't heard a lot about guys that they might be able to bring in. You wrote an interesting article over at InsideTheBirds.com about a couple of guys they might be able to target to bring in here to replenish some guys if they walk out the door. So who are some guys you have your eyes on that could be some fits if they lose guys in free agency?
Yeah, well, let's start with quarterback, right? We know historically the team places such a high precedent at the position. You know that Gardner Minshew may opt to go for a more favorable spot because he wants to be a starting quarterback in this league. It's obviously not going to happen here. So when you look at some of the quarterback options that are out there, Marcus Mariota is a name that you might want to entertain if you're the Eagles. Taylor Heinicke is one that's probably going to cost you a little bit more. But then you have someone like Mike White of the New York Jets who has capably stepped in and performed adequately at the position. He's 27 years old, 6'5". I think he started 8 games over the past 2 seasons. So he gives you a veteran presence there. I think that obviously you want to add somebody to that room to sort of challenge Ian Book, who is largely unproven and a third-year player who hasn't taken a lot of reps. So you don't just want to hand him the role. I mean, the Eagles obviously really value that. So I would look for him, maybe even Tyler Huntley, Pro Bowl quarterback Tyler Huntley, as an option there, as well as he's 25 years old. And I think he, too, has started 8 games over the past 2 seasons, has a little bit of upside. He's an athletic player. I really got a chance to see him in action for the week at the East-West Shrine Bowl a few seasons ago. So those are 2 guys that I would look at there.
You look at one area we keep talking about with C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps. There's a possibility that they could lose not one but both of their safeties here. So is safety a spot as well that they could possibly replenish in free agency?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a pretty good draft class for safety.
Yeah, it is. There's a kid that I really like, Antonio Johnson, who I think the Eagles could be able to target there if they trade back from 30 or trade up from 62. I think that's going to be his sweet spot there. Really versatile, lengthy player. But we can get into that later. But I think from a free agent standpoint, Mike, there are a lot of enticing names that I think when you're looking for a bargain variety type of player, obviously Nasir Adderley is a player that you're going to hear. John Johnson III, who's only 27 years old. Von Bell is a name. But for me, Adrian Amos, formerly of the Chicago Bears and most recently the Green Bay Packers, to me makes a lot of sense. There's a correlation there. He was with Sean Desai when Desai was the defensive quality control coach over in Chicago. He's a steady player, doesn't necessarily make a ton of big plays, but he's known for his leadership, his astute football IQ, just a steady presence. Just looking around the league, you see a lot of Packers fans that don't want him to leave the team. So I think that speaks volumes of what he's able to do. I think he's more of a glue guy, and you want to add a veteran player of his caliber. I think he's getting 29 years old, going to be 30. I think to start the season, when you look at the fact that you might have to draft a safety, he's a guy that you want mentoring them, and he's played in multiple schemes, so you have that as well and the familiarity. So that to me would make a lot of sense. And also, if you're looking for a depth option, obviously we know the Eagles special teams were a mess last season for the better part of the season. So Deion Bush, formerly of the Kansas City Chiefs, but he spent 6 of his seasons under Sean Desai when Desai was the safeties coach, and also the one season when he was a defensive coordinator, he had his best season. He's more of a depth rotational player, but a standout special teamer. So to me, when you're looking at certain areas that the Eagles need to fill, those 2 guys make a ton of sense.
All right. A lot of discussion, Andrew, and I want to get thoughts from you, obviously, on the running back position. Looks like Miles Sanders. What is your take on now Sanders in free agency now that some of these franchise tags have been handed out. How does that change his free agent status?
Well, to me, I think Miles Sanders is going to be someone that lingers a little bit on the market. I don't know that – I mean, the teams are well aware of what he is at this point. I mean, he's just 25 years old, and he is coming off a career season. But the Eagles sort of showed you they were essentially phasing him out of the offense. I mean, he only played 57% of the snaps. So credit to Miles for maximizing those opportunities. But I think that from a volume standpoint, the Eagles were hesitant to give him the lion's share of the carries. He's not much of a pass catcher. Pass blocking was not his forte. So he is a limited player, but he's going to, if the Eagles were to retain him or if a team's going to bring him in, obviously you're bringing him in to be an early down runner and be the focal point of your backfield. And I just don't know that he's that kind of player. So I think that he's going to get a little bit less than he thinks. But even at a certain price point, I don't know if the Eagles would want him back. I mean, you started to see Kenny Gainwell take the reins late in the season, and they like Boston Scott. They could probably bring him back for a relatively cost-effective salary, I would imagine. And you could look to the free agent pool to get somebody much more at a much more favorable price point, such as Alexander Madison, who adds a different dimension to what they already have in the backfield, who is a tough downhill runner. He finishes runs. He plays with urgency. He's a great pass blocker. He can also catch the ball a little bit. 70 catches over 4 years. I think that doesn't necessarily tell the tale. He looks very adept at doing that. And you're getting a well-rounded running back who can handle early down and short yardage work and complement what they already have there in the running back stable.
Yeah, Madison's a name that a lot of people seem interested in, but a lot of conversation about Bijan Robinson and that number 10 pick. Your philosophy and thoughts on that? I know a lot of people keep bringing him up, and I see, you look at the big boards, and he's the number 3 rated player. Daniel Jeremiah's recent top 50. I mean, if you have the 3rd rated player on the board when you draft at number 10, do you have to consider it, or is that just too high?
Well, obviously, Bijan Robinson's he's a game changer, and he ultimately alters your offense and creates optionality. And obviously, his running, his forte and his skill set would be accentuated with Jalen Hurts, who's really the +1, and opens things up. You saw what it did for Miles Sanders. So having a player of his caliber would change the entire dimension of the offense. But that said, you look at the Eagles' philosophy. I don't know how you can justify it. Obviously, he is a blue chip player, but knowing what you could possibly lose. I mean, 7 defensive starters are poised to be free agents here next week. You have to start restocking the cupboard there, and there's going to be a lot of blue chip talent that you could do that with from a defensive standpoint. So I think that would be a more wise allocation of resources. If you're the Eagles, there's going to be a player like a Jamar Gibbs from Alabama that you can look at. I mentioned the running back from UCLA, Zach Charbonnet, as another player. And throughout the draft, you're going to find different bigger body running backs that offer a certain skill set the Eagles don't already have. So I think that as enticing as it may be, he would have to tumble a little bit further down the first round for the Eagles to probably consider that.
Yeah. It's one of those things. How do you, let's just say, okay, they took a running back and it's Robinson at number 10. How would having an elite back like that change their offense?
Well, immensely. For one, you're able to pay some players there. You look at Devontae Smith's contract coming up. I mean, you do this knowing that. I mean, I think it always makes sense to take a running back of his caliber if you're a team that the window's open and you have a chance to contend for a Super Bowl, because you're only going to probably give that player one contract. So it would only make a lot of sense to be one of those upper echelon teams. But I mean, he would just open things up for everybody, for the receivers, for Jalen Hurts to maximize his potential on the outside there. It's really interesting and intriguing to think about what he would do to that backfield and to the whole offense, and what Brian Johnson could do with somebody of his skill set. But I still think it would be a bit rich and probably an unwise use of resources there to take him at 10.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 from InsideTheBirds.com. Yes, if that's been a discussion, I think it's going to continue because of the fact that they have 2 first-round picks. I guess the next question would be, and this has a lot to do with the off the field, but if Jalen Carter stumbled to number 10, you would have to take him there as long as the off-the-field problems are not, a problem.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the Eagles have to do their due diligence there, and of course they will, and every team will. But I mean, it's a serious. I mean, what's going on with him is very serious. So obviously they need to make sure that everything checks out there, and they have to go back further into his past to make sure that this isn't a sign of potentially a sign of things to come. But yeah, if he falls to 10, Mike, or anywhere, 8, and the Eagles are right there, I think, him being within striking distance, that would be a no-brainer. I mean, obviously the Eagles need to replenish the defensive tackle spot when you consider the fact that Javon Hargrave could possibly leave. I think he could earn anything up to 19 or 20 million a year. The teams are going to pay a premium for pass rushing defensive tackles. So, I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility, and I think that would be too rich for the Eagles to be able to do, although they do certainly prioritize the trenches. And Fletcher Cox, to me, is a player that I think that he thinks that he's still an elite player, and he's probably going to look for a more substantial payday than what the Eagles are willing to do. So that leaves just Jordan Davis and Milton Williams and a host of young players who are frankly on the fringes of the roster. So I think that you need to at least consider addressing it in the first 2 rounds. And you might also want to supplement that by adding like a mid-tier veteran, such as, I wrote about Colin Saunders, who I really liked coming out of the 2019 draft.
Give me a little thoughts because, you just talked about pass rushing defensive tackle, and Kalijah Kancey is a guy who had a historic running performance at the draft. Has he put himself into conversation at number 10?
I think he has, but I think if you're a team that's willing to sort of fork over a premium pick on someone like Kalijah Kancey, you have to remember he's 6 foot 280. He's 5 pounds heavier than he played at last season, according to what he said at the combine. But he's sort of in the mode of an Aaron Donald, and Aaron Donald's done okay for himself at that size. But not everybody's wired that way, Mike. So you have to envision where you see him and what his ceiling ultimately is. And I think that as a rookie, he's probably going to be a situational player. I mean, his size doesn't necessarily lend itself favorably to being an every down player. But when you look at how teams are willing to pay a premium for pass rushing interior linemen and what that ultimately can do in sort of short circuiting a passing game and getting quarterbacks off their spot and everything like that, he certainly is in the conversation now, I think, at 10. I mean, you look at his explosiveness, his exceptional short area quickness, and his hand usage and his pass rush plan. I think that there's a lot to like there with him. The question is where do they ultimately, what is his ceiling? Do they see him, ascending to an Aaron Donald-ish caliber? And I mean, that's obviously Aaron Donald's a Hall of Fame caliber talent. So that's not necessarily a fair comparison, but do they see him as a viable starter for the long term?
I'm going to get your thoughts because you got a player in Hargrave who most likely looks like he's just going to get paid a lot. Milton Williams, what kind of role can he evolve into moving forward?
Yeah, Milton Williams, and I'm glad you asked me about Milton Williams. He's a player that I definitely made note of after the season as someone that I was really impressed with because he played fewer snaps than he did as a rookie, but I thought he really, every time he was on the field, he made a hustle play. He got in the backfield. He was disruptive. He had 4 sacks, which was double his total as a rookie. Now, that said, I don't know that. I mean, he has shorter arms and things like that. He's a high effort player, but you wonder if playing him at a starting player's snap share, it sort of diminishes his skill set and his impact, right? Sometimes players of that mold tend to wear down, and I don't know how the Eagles exactly view him. I tended to view him coming out of the draft at Louisiana Tech as a number 3 defensive tackle, and I think that that's ideally where he would fit. But I mean, I'm really impressed with where he is in terms of his development, and obviously, I think if the Eagles want to move forward with the position, and obviously they prioritize it, I think they need to add another veteran, and whether that's mid-tier or maybe someone like like the defensive lineman from the Broncos, Draymond Jones, or address it in the draft. I think they have to, because I don't think you can go into it with there's a lot of question marks there with just those 2 players in Jordan Davis.
Yeah,
Milton Williams.
Milton Williams last year played about 36% of the snaps. He had 4 sacks last year. You wonder if he got a little bit more percentage of those snaps, could he provide that pass rush, not to the same level as Hargrave, but can he be a pass rushing, rotational tackle?
Oh, absolutely. And he can also he offers positional versatility at defensive end, which you saw him do that early as a rookie. But I think he definitely can. He has the skill set for it, and I think he would be the quintessential third tackle that can provide pressure and come in there and provide some juice from the interior.
We're talking with Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 from InsideTheBirds.com and the Inside the Birds podcast. We saw a lot about the Hargrave, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, and Bradbury. They are like the three big guys. But what is your thoughts on T.J. Edwards and the possibility of him getting poached by somebody?
Yeah, he's a fascinating one because I think in an ideal world, the Eagles would like to retain him. I mean, obviously, he's a great story development, a former undrafted free agent. We know his story, but he's also a homegrown talent. And at 26 years old and wearing the green dot and ascending into that a prominent leadership role in the team and growing into that, I think you want to bring somebody in. You want to retain him because if you think about it, they could lose the entire middle of their defense, both defensive tackles, both linebackers, and potentially both safeties.
Yeah.
So he's a physical, tone-setting presence there in the middle, and I think that he also has room to grow. Obviously, he's not going to be he's not known for his pass rush prowess, but I think that you saw Nick Rallis be able to tap into that and enhance what he's able to do in that area, and I think there's still more for him to be able to prove. And I think putting him next to Nakobe Dean really gives the Eagles the best of both worlds in their skill set.
Yeah, that should be interesting. The T.J. Edwards one, as you kind of said, they found this guy. He was an undrafted guy. They developed him, and that you like to keep your own. Those are the kind of guys you like to keep around. I just think someone's going to come in and offer him, too much money to turn down.
Well, I mean, it's certainly something to consider, but I just don't know how much teams are going to willing to be able to shell out to a player who is probably largely viewed, I think it's fair to say, as a one-dimensional player at 26 years old at a position that's not necessarily a priority, and it's really trending towards these lighter hybrid-type players at the second level that can do a multitude of things that I don't necessarily think that TJ can do. So he might be a player that I think ends up coming back just based on that alone.
Yeah, that will be interesting. And then, of course, Kaiser White, who signed a one-year deal last year. They brought him in. He had a nice year. There's Nakobe Dean kind of hanging in the weeds there, waiting for one of those two guys to go. I would imagine the Eagles would not bring back both of those guys. They want to get Dean on the field, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, Nakobe Dean is waiting in the wings. They invested a third-round pick in him. I do think he needs to get a little bit stronger physically and develop his play strength. But we saw him play. It's a small sample size, but he got in the backfield. He was active. I think his where he's at right now. I mean, at the more of a weak side type of player, I think he would be more of a replacement for a Kaiser White, and you want that thumper beside him to sort of, like I said, be able to have the best of both worlds and not make it a vulnerability standpoint in the running game. So that to me, I think that he would be more of a replacement for Kaiser.
Post combine, your favorite corner is
Witherspoon, Devin Witherspoon. I haven't wavered from that, Mike. I really like his physicality, his fluidity. And I think he's a plug-and-play guy from day one and a good compliment to Darius Slay.
Okay. Keep an eye on that. If you like a corner in this draft, Andrew just gave you Witherspoon. You've got defensive tackle options that we'll probably be hearing a lot more about between now and April 27th. I don't know. Do you think offensive line is in play?
It's hard to rule it out, but I just think that with so many deficiencies on the defensive side, I think it would probably be further down the list. A lot of it's going to depend on what happens with Jason Kelce, right? I mean, that could alter everything because then you have Cam Jurgens that you can plug in at right guard. Then Jack Driscoll is now, a primary backup. But if Kelsey's not there, then you have Cam Jurgens. And now I don't know how comfortable if you're the Eagles that you want Jack Driscoll playing right guard. And then all of a sudden that becomes a possibility because I don't think that Isaac Seumalo has a chance of coming back. I think he's going to command a pretty sizable contract.
Yeah, I agree with you there. All right, Andrew DiCecco at DiCecco NFL. Check out his stuff over at InsideTheBirds.com and Football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, appreciate it, bud.
You got it. Thanks.
And Andrew's back next week here for Football at 4.